What's up, YouTube? So today I want to talk about templates. So for those who may be getting into music production a little bit more, getting a little bit more comfortable with it, and you're starting to output quite a few tracks, there are certain things you can do to speed up the workflow, specifically when there's certain instruments and certain things that you do in every track when you're starting up your track and stuff like that. And that's why I think templates are a very important way of being able to speed up that workflow. Especially when you're confined with time, if you're working a day job and you only have like an hour or two certain evenings to work on a track, being able to open your DAW and everything is there already set to go. You can just throw in some new ideas and, craft it from there. You don't have to recreate all the essentials from scratch. You've got a lot of the instruments and a lot of the samplers and stuff already loaded that you can just change things and tweak things to fit the style that you want to go for at that moment. So every so often I create myself a template using sort of new instruments that I've acquired and new ideas that I've got. And I think it's about time that I recreate myself a template. And I figure this is a great way to show you guys a couple of tricks that I use when creating a template and just show you guys the kind of structure of the templates that I create. So let's dive in and have a look. So here I've started up a blank project, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by popping in a ruler track. And for those who aren't really so well versed in Cubase as such, ruler track is a great way of being able to apply. You're not limited to the number of these, so you can add, for example, to see whereabouts in the track certain things are going to happen. It's just like an extra timeline, for example. So usually what I do is I'll jump to the sort of middle section. Around 2 to 3 minutes, and I'll start crafting the sort of template around that section. So say, for example, now the template is finished, and I open it up and I want to create a new idea into a track. I'm essentially creating the main loop of the track, and then I'm going to break it down from there into different variations, into breakdowns and build-ups and stuff like that. So generally speaking, when I'm creating my templates, I'm creating that sort of main loop section, and then I can dumb it down from there. So first things first, I'm going to throw in a ruler track, as I said, and then I'm going to put in a folder, and I'm going to start putting together my structure for my kick and bass. So here we can call this kick and bass. I can actually remove this one for now, just so it doesn't complicate us, because we do have this timeline at the top. So you're not limited to which VSTs you use to do what. I mean, it all depends, what you're most comfortable with. And I guess that's the power of being able to, create your own templates is you're doing things kind of how you want to and how you're comfortable with doing it. So you don't necessarily have to use FacePlant to create your kicks. You can use a plugin like Kick2 or Native Instruments TRK, whatever you're comfortable with, I'm just going to use FacePlant because I've got a bunch of presets that I've made in very recent videos. So what I can do is I can always link these videos in the description, so you guys can always recreate the sound, these particular sounds if you want to. So I'm going to open up the kick drum over here. We can actually call this kick. So what I'll usually do is just straight off the bat, I'll create my kick synth channel, and then I'll also create a sampler track that I route through the group and everything. I mean, now at the moment, I'm not going to load a sample in it. But what I do is I just create the track so that, when I'm done synthesizing the kick, I can just bounce it and drag it in there. And I don't have to change any routing, What I'm going to do here is I'm also going to set my tempo to something that I use quite often. I can always change it when I jump in and start editing the actual track. So here, what I want to do is going to create another sampler track, but I'm going to use TX16W. It's a really cool free sampler. And the cool thing about it is it's a multi-sample. It's a multi-sample sampler. So you can load up different bass notes and trigger them with those exact notes on the keyboard. I'm not going to dive too in depth with it now, but I'm just explaining the fact that I have the sampler and the actual synth channel already loaded. So all I need to do is bounce it out, drag it in. It's already routed through the same groups and all sorts of stuff like that. So at this point is when I want to create my group channel. So what I'll do is I'll highlight all of them, open up my mixer, right click, and then say add group channel to selected tracks. So here what I want to call it is kick and bass. Put that away, and I can drag that into this folder. So now we've got our like complete kick and bass structure in there, and we can go ahead and start tweaking that to our liking. What I want to do here is actually want to change the color as well. So let's start putting in our kick drums. Bear in mind, we're just creating the template here, so we don't have to fine tune these to the exact sort of, final sound of a track. We're just laying down the backbone for which we can jump into later on, just to make our lives a little bit easier when we do want to get a little bit more in depth with it. So let's pop on this fundamental saw. I've explained why this is so awesome, I believe, in a previous video. And we want one voice. So the kick and bass together, I try peak at -12. I mean, obviously it's going to alter while I tweak it and stuff, but I like to get the basics down, like I said. Just get it sounding, semi-decent before saving the template, so that when I do dive in, there's just minor tweaks that need to happen to, finalize that sound that I'm looking for. So that's sounding pretty good in terms of the sort of just bare bone kick and bass. I slapped a LFO tool so I could see what was happening there with the phase. So I can actually just turn this off now. And I want to show you something really cool about what I like to put into my templates. And that is Snap Heap. Obviously, I've discussed this in a previous tutorial, but I want to show you guys why this is so powerful on something like the kick and the bass channel. So, for example, something like a filter. When you do your filter sweeps on your kick and your bass, there's not very many plugins that have this, wide variety of different effects you can apply that, simplify something like a filter sweep, but still add a little bit of extra flavor. So, for example, let's just put on like a high pass filter. Let's put on a slight amount of reverb. So keep in mind, this is the kick and bass channel. So reverb isn't essentially something that you would always use, but in terms of an effect, you can use it quite creatively for, build-ups and breakdowns and that kind of thing. So anyway. So you see, you can do these weird like phasing tricks, but then using the mix, you can just, cut it out again. So I like to simplify it by just creating, one macro that'll do, a sweep of various effects parameters. And, obviously then when you open up the template to create a new project, you've already got a starting point for a nice kind of sweep effect, but then you can still jump in there and alter these effects, change it from a reverb to a delay or a different type of filter and all sorts of stuff like that. So let's quickly just assign this to the mix as well as the cutoff. Okay, so just for now, just so it doesn't get so repetitive, I'm just going to turn this off, and we can turn it back on once we've got like more variations, and we can, span it out. Once we've actually created the entire template, we can start looking at, doing different variations of that. So anyway, let's dive into the percussions. So here, what I want to do is let's just create another folder. Percussion. So generally speaking, I will break my percussions into two different kind of folders. I'll have the main rhythm, which will be like your vanilla hi-hats, snare, the kind of stuff that won't really change all that much, like rhythmically and sonically throughout different tracks. And then I'll have like my atmospheric and experimental percussions in a separate group. So here, what I want to do is just immediately, straight off the bat, just create another folder inside this one and call this main rhythms. So here we can go ahead and create a couple of sampler tracks. This is going to be like our closed hi-hats, our open hi-hats, and our snare drum. or what we can do is, to save us a bit of time, let's just drag in one sample there. Let's find a closed hi-hat. So now let's open up our mixer, right click on the sampler track, add group channel to selected tracks. Let's call this one main rhythms. Pop this one into this one. So this one let's call closed hat, and then we can actually duplicate it. The routing remains the same, so it still goes through that group. And let's call this open hat, and then find an open hat sample to drop in there. Let's put a snare in. Let's call this main snare, and then let's just put a secondary snare. Call this one aux snare. Yeah, something like slightly clappy like that is always cool for an aux snare. Anyway, so again, we don't want to get too technical with these things. We want to leave space for variation, when you do jump in with a template and start creating it as an actual track. So just put in like the basics, something like that offbeat open hat, just a very simple snare and that kind of stuff, because then so that, like I said, when you jump in, you don't have all the stuff already there that you have to kind of wrestle with. Here what I'll go ahead and do is I want to create a effects send, simple reverb, just put it on there, that I can send some of the main percussions to. And I'm going to send this one to the main rhythms group, and then we can use the amount of send on each of the channels as like a individual mix for each of those instruments, for example. And then I like doing a similar thing with a distortion as well. So let's duplicate this. Let me actually just call this main rhythms reverb. And then on this one, we can call this main rhythms distortion. And let's put decapitator on here. And let me just check, is it sending through to the correct channel? Yes, main rhythms. Awesome. And turn some of the EQs that were on there from the reverb off so I can do it again and actually hear what's going on. So the cool thing about doing it this way is you've got control over each of those sounds send to the distortion. So here, for example, that like closed hi-hat was snapping through way too hard into that distortion. You just turn the send down on that exact sound and you've sorted that out. So I think it was the same thing was happening with the open hat. So we can go and just reduce this as well. Have I done? Okay, so let's add a new folder. Let's call this one aux perks. This is the kind of thing that I'm going to put stuff like crash samples, big kind of drum hits with reverbs on, that kind of stuff. So I generally leave these in audio tracks because I can reverse them and all sorts of stuff like that. Then what I'll do is I will send that to a group just so that I can come in here and duplicate the channel and the routing and everything is already intact. Awesome, that's it for this episode. I'm going to cover the rest, like the synths, leads, all sorts of stuff like that in the next episode. Then what I'll do is I'll follow it up with an episode of me basically taking the template and fleshing it out into a full track. Just so you guys get a kind of A to Z of complete track from scratch kind of situation. A big thanks to IDM Mag, proud supporters of the dance music scene and my channel. Anyway, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. See you guys next time.